All right, what is up? Another week, Rush
Yes,
Hour
sir.
Pod. Appreciate you jumping on, T Dubs, Justin. We
Yes,
got.
yes,
We
indeed.
thought this week we'd focus on life cycle marketing. What are your thoughts, Justin? That good?
I'm really excited about this one. I'm really excited about your fit right now because you got the real Hawaii vibes going, and I feel like anybody who's watching this will be able to just kind of get into that mode with you. So that's great. Thanks again for
Yeah,
making time to chat from time with the fam. But
yeah.
yeah, I'm
I'm in
excited.
Hawaii, as you could tell, but always got time for this.
Of course,
Um,
of course.
I thought we'd just kind of give everybody a quick rundown. I think everyone hears, hey, life cycle marketing, email push. It's that's what I should focus on. But really, like, how do you do it? How do you get started? What you need to think about, um, and kind of the I don't want to say 101, but just the basics. If you're thinking about getting into this industry, or you need a refresher on some things, and you want to touch it up, we figured we'd jump in here and talk through it. That work?
Yeah, that's perfect. It seemed like folks really liked the last session that we did on influencer marketing and some ways to kind of think about, lining out the strategy there. So, our whole goal is to put together, very practical tips and experience that can help our community. So, what I thought I'd do just to kind of set up and taking a step back first, like T-Dub, I've done lifecycle marketing, I've touched in a number of different roles, but T-Dub, he's like the man. I mean, this is a guy who's kind of done it his entire career at all different phases and stages of companies. So I think it's going to be really, really fun to kind of get into his mind on this. But just to set the stage on what lifecycle marketing is, I thought I'd start there, and then we can kind of take a look at what are some of the steps that you would do, and we'll get your cosign or
Sure,
not on if it's the
sure.
right approach.
Yeah, let's do
So
it.
lifecycle marketing, you could think of it as a lot of people just thinking of it as tactically, hey, it's sending pushes, it's sending emails, um, you know, maybe some other thing. Maybe you're sending like, maybe it's an in-app interstitial or toast or things like that, right? And those are tactically correct. But when we're talking about lifecycle marketing, you really want to think of it as a strategic approach that focuses on engaging with customers at every stage of their journey. And so in the life cycle pieces, you're thinking about their whole life cycle from their first introduction to your brand or product to, them monetizing in some way or sharing the product, et cetera, and becoming ideally loyal advocates. So the idea is you want to tailor your marketing efforts based on where the customer is in their relationship with the brand or product, whether they're first discovering it, first making a purchase, or engaging with the brand long term. And it would probably be easy to just kind of jump in again to tactics. But one thing that Manesh mentioned on our last session with him, and again, he has a lot of great experience within marketing and growth, and really working with customers, is the importance of measurement and optimization. And so I think it's helpful to start there because really, without the ability to kind of measure what you're doing, to A/B test, to make sure it's kind of a holistic approach, and take a look at how you're tracking key metrics across each stage, I don't think you're going to be successful, or you at least won't be able to really iterate in a way that's going to drive continued success. So I think where I'd like to start, T is maybe some of your kind of best practice or insights on, all right, you're starting in a lifecycle marketing role, you're either starting, kind of helping them start the practice, or you're part of the team. How are you thinking about measurement at the beginning? What kind of questions are you asking to your
Yeah,
cross-functional stakeholders? What does that look like for you?
yeah, and I'll even take it one step further, which is if you need to upsell your leadership team on the importance of email, because this happened
Yes.
when we were at Twitch and we were at some other gaming companies. It was, oh, these users don't, these are young, or they're mobile, they don't use email, they don't need email, they don't check email. And just for some background info, there are 4.5 billion email addresses out there, which is half of the entire population. And you talk about, oh, my audience is young, they don't use email. 60% of Gen Z checks the email more than once a day, and I think it's 50% transact on email, meaning they get promotions, and they actually trust and understand their email, and they will make purchases off email. So this is not an this is a wide reaching channel that it doesn't have the barriers that others do, and I think it's something every company can rely on. I think the stats are fully back that up. I think 90% of people in professional roles check their email, are on their email multiple times per day, which is incredible. Like those are incredible stats that you should really take seriously in terms of like thinking about how you want to use a platform. So I would say look up some of those stats and put them in there. And like the first thing is understanding how the company has set up their email list. So if you're thinking right out of the gate, who are the people that are in our database, and how did we acquire them? So meaning, is it registration? Is it a sign up for a newsletter? Did you ask them to give them an email address to make a purchase? Are they all of those things you need to really get a deep understanding of, because that's going to set up the life cycle marketing that Justin's describing. And for all the roles that I've had, and just to give you background, I've done it at every stage. So you're talking, large insurance companies, gaming companies, brand new startups, um, you know, gaming companies that went. I literally took one from never sent an email to the third largest email sender in the world. So that gives you an idea of the breadth of the stuff that I'm talking about. And I would say, um, first thing is pull the list of all your email addresses, and then get an understanding of where they are within your product. So how long ago you got the email address? Like when did they actually reach the site for the first time? When were they a first time user? So you're going to have a either acquired email date and then registration date in your data, and then you're going to try to break down all of their stats. So your data team is going to love you for this. But day 1, day 3, day 7, day 10, day 30, day 60, every possible iteration that you think would be useful, and understand everyone that has an email address, this is their data. All right, and you want to really understand that, and that's going to be a hard data pull. And then everyone else, and then grab the people who do not have email addresses, which is anonymous and others, and run the same stats and try to understand immediately what's the difference. I think one issue people run into is they'll just pull general stats, not those that have the email address, because giving a company your email address is a flag that they have a relationship with you, they trust you, and they're
Right.
willing. They're further down the funnel. So you don't want to compare, um, the data incorrectly. So that's the first step. And once you get that, you'll have a really good understanding of who, where, what, why. That the age old marketing stuff. And you understand. And I'll give you an example. When we were at Tagged, we did this exact same thing. Pulled it all, got an understanding of where they were, and we saw, hey, we have a real issue at day 7. It was like at day 7, we're seeing a massive drop off. What are we doing? And then kind of digging into like how are we thinking about outreach? And we noticed after day 7, people were getting upwards of 70, 80 emails a week from the company. So it was like, oh, that makes sense. We basically drown people out, and they no longer care about our emails. So every company is going to be a little different, but like taking a hard look at that data, and then looking at the inbox, and understanding like, hey, how many emails are we sending these people? Is it too little? Is it a lot? And you're kind of going to test your way into all of these things. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
I think it does. One thing that I'm curious about is where I think in practice, if someone hasn't worked with like kind of a life cycle leader like you, and kind of the first time you're asking them to pull this data and understand, I imagine at the end of the day they're looking at the dollars and cents of the impact. So once you kind of pulled this data, kind of showed where the drop off, et cetera, how do you make the then how then do you make the business case around this is worth investing in terms of like changing their life cycle marketing approach? And I imagine maybe even bringing in product design, engineering, other teams to help you to execute it?
Yeah, usually you'll pull the data and you'll see it as across the board that the people with email address have better metrics, right? They retain better, they have higher art revenue per user, and you can take those things and you can do the math on them. Like, hey, I can acquire more email addresses and do a better job top of funnel. And then within the emails, maybe I can convert them better. And then you do the math. If I give a 10% increase, 20% increase, 30%, like if I can do those things, what does that mean to the company? And I think you'll find, I think across the board, for every dollar spent on email, the return is $36, which is incredible. I think it's the only
Wow.
channel that is out there that does those kind of numbers. But you're limited, right? You're limited because it's not as broad as a ad revenue, and it's not as you can't go to, you can't run a Super Bowl ad through your email. You need to do the work to acquire that customer, and that is sometimes um, a barrier to entry, right? You've got to get the email address, which is easier said than done. So they need to hit your site. You need to be able to prompt them to have a reason to get your email. But that's probably the if you're really starting out fresh, that's going to be the hardest part, finding a really good reason to get your email address into a database without it being sort of clickbait and scammy.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point because obviously it's something you can identify coming in as a leader, but to get people to convert to actually give you your email in the first place, I imagine based on how they're, giving you that email at first is either like through some application or through some, website, et cetera. So I imagine it's also working with product as well and ensuring that like that's being collected well or it's kind of best practices and then actual capture of that either registration event or you know joining a wait list or interest in a product or whatever else it is.
Right. No, I mean, there's always an incentive, right? What is the reason they want to give you the email address? And usually, I mean, you just think about the times you've given your email address to a company. It's usually like you're about to make a purchase, you want to sign up for a future purchase, you want to get some kind of information, you want an exchange, you want a reason where it makes sense. You don't just want to like flash it up. You're about you're on the site, you're kind of reading an article, and then immediately it's like, hey, give us your email address. Like those, just think about it in terms of what they're getting. They're not gonna give you the email address for no reason. You got to
Right.
give them a good reason, right?
Got it. Got it. So I think maybe so that's super helpful. So, just to kind of run back what you were talking about, yeah, obviously you want to take a look at all the customer data. You want to look at the users who have emails and the ones who don't, understand the differentiated behavior, look at the life cycle of those users across, that initial kind of 60 days, figure out, all right, well, where is it that we think we can make an impact? And then
Right,
ultimately it's, okay, well, how do we incentivize more people to give us that information
right,
as well? And how can we model out? All right, if we're able to improve it by X percent, then we can see this downstream revenue impact of Y percent. I think that all makes sense. That's probably a good kind of transition into onboarding and engagement piece. So that initial onboarding
yes.
phase, kind of first impressions are really important at shaping kind of long-term customer relationships. So what are some, in your experience, what are some of like the key elements of a successful onboarding email sequence, and how do you prevent drop-offs at this stage?
Yeah, I think what I've found works is being more aggressive early really helps because you're top of mind. They gave you the email address. They probably went down your funnel and thought this this product or content is interesting. I'm going to sign up. So like hitting them up early and often is much more helpful because it's top of mind. If you wait too long, you feel like, oh, I don't want to bother them. If you wait too long, nowadays 7 days is an eternity. Think about downloading an app and not hearing from them for 7 days. You probably have no idea what it is at that point. So like
Right.
day 0, 1, 2, 3 are very important. Like you don't want to wait. A lot of people get too conservative and say I'm going to wait a day. I wouldn't do that. I would go hours. So
Mm,
you gave us your email address at that moment. you send the confirmation, and it should be, a very nice, um, company style welcome, and then immediately follow up 4 hours, 3 hours, however, whatever your, product and business metrics show. Follow up right away with whatever offer or thing you're trying to promote, and do it and give them real value right out of the gate. This is why you want to, remember our company. Here's what we do. Here's why, and send it to them, and then repeat, and then give them a lot of info. I would do 2, 3 emails that first day.
Wow.
Really get them to understand who you are, why it's important to them. Set the foundation, for why you want a relationship with this company, and then it's, get in the cadence of maybe every day, every other day.
So I'm pretty struck, and I imagine some other people maybe as well, with like the number of emails on that first day, 2 to 3 within that first 24 hours. Can you kind of dig into like the psychology of that a bit? I imagine that it really ties to the value creation in those emails, right? Like, people won't feel as inundated if they just signed up. Maybe they're excited to use a new product and they feel like they're getting value there. But
Yes.
how do you, yeah, did I kind of nail it there? Like, what's the psychology around getting more emails in that
No,
first period?
that's totally it. While it's fresh on your brain, and really, you almost think about the inbox as like a Twitter timeline, right? You're in there, and they're getting emails throughout that day, and you don't know when they're really going to check them. They're brand new to you. So I'd rather over communicate out of the gate, than under. And I know that's going to sound scary for a lot of people. They're going to be like, "Oh man, everyone's going to unsubscribe. They're not going to care." But like, if you really craft your email campaigns properly, with, keep them short and sweet and one thing, you're really hitting them with one thing, not a giant newsletter that takes you 20 minutes to scroll through it and read about all your companies, whatever, like, from the company side, you feel like what you're saying is important, but you gotta have some empathy. They're quickly scrolling through their phone, they're looking at the subject line, and they're gonna probably take away one thing. So just give them that one thing. Make it really
Hmm.
clear, really concise, and do that a couple times throughout the day. That
Yeah.
first day, and if you feel like you want to do the test, do a test of like, hey, I'm gonna put a massive newsletter together that has my company history and why, da, 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 and put it all in there and see how that works, versus a short and sweet, punchy. I really, think people's attention spans have gotten really small over
Hmm.
time. So like, the more you can test that and capture that, and that's not to say it works for everybody. Everybody's audience is a little different. But I think if you're talking on a promotional side, you're essentially sending marketing emails.
Yeah.
These are not, necessarily the most important thing. It's different if you're healthcare or your insurance provider and you need to get people like very vital information. That email can be long.
Right.
If you're if you're an e-commerce store and you're selling watches, or if you're, selling clothes or shirts or newsletters, whatever it is, you got to know you're not curing cancer. Then make it quick, and make it, succinct to your message, so they get the point and they understand, and they tie that with you. Like, hey, these guys do this. Here's the thing that they provided me today. That's great. I can't wait to see the next one.
Got it.
And that'll do the trick. What I've seen is like, you keep it short and sweet, people remember that. If you go long and sort of like long-winded with all the information, you put everything in there, it's just
Hmm.
overwhelming. Like,
Right.
think about when's the last time you got a promotional email
You read the
and
whole
you
thing.
sat there and read it for a long
Yeah.
time. Like, it just doesn't happen. It
100%.
just never happens.
100%.
Yeah.
I'll kind of I kind of want to go back a little bit, but to go forward, just in the context of some folks will be, some folks will just have interest about lifecycle marketing generally. Others will be thinking about like practical applications, and they may
Yep.
be on a marketing team where they have a lot of emails but haven't done anything with them yet, or they're trying to like refigure out a strategy. So maybe I'm taking a step back to like the best providers for sending out emails. Like, what are maybe like a couple of the top three, and then after that, like, how do you make sure that your list is set up to actually deliver, so that you're not just being perceived as like spam, and you're just kind of going, in the spam box,
Yes.
you're actually getting an inbox.
Yeah, I've kind of worked across every possible sender email tool. Yes Mail, that's an old name. Cheetah Mail is another old name, and then Braze and Salesforce. You can go on up the list. What I've generally found is they all have the capabilities. It's really up to you and your management, and what you need in your team. So and by that I mean list management in terms of like, hey, how do I clean up my own list? Do I keep that separately, or do I want to upload it all to my email provider and let them manage it? That's something you want to think about. I tend to want to do it all myself and have my own
Mm,
database, and then sync between the two. Um, but I can't remember a time where I felt like one email provider was doing incredible work over another, and it's really
mm,
about keeping your own list. When we were at tagged, it was we cleaned our own list regularly. And what I mean by cleaning our list is, we flagged we if anyone marked us as spam, we immediately flagged them. If people did not open emails for a certain number of times, we would flag them and remove them and just not send. If things got out of order, we would clean it up and put them separate, to keep the user in the active database truly active, instead of continually trying to send to dead email addresses. And that really kept things clean for us. And then anytime you acquire a bunch of new users, if you're watching your data every day in terms of like your new user flow, if you got an influx of 1 million email addresses in a day, something's up, and you
hmm
want to test into that, right? You want to probably send a few, send a couple of thousand and see what the spam rate is and try to understand. So you gotta stay on it. Like that's really the life cycle manager's job, to be on top of that, right? And people will ask, oh, I can just do this as my side gig. I'm the CEO. I can run everything. I'll just do email on the side too. Why not? But that's the part. Are you really gonna every day
hmm
go look at all the new users, see the influx, understand understand like, hey, I got an extra 100,000 welcome emails that I have to send today. Is that okay? Like, no, that's not. You should, if you're not getting that on every day and they're getting 10x, you probably want to separate it out, pull the email, do a small send, see if it's all clean, and then move from there. Right? Like you're constantly trying to battle the possibility of spammers trying to like infiltrate your list.
mm. That's really interesting. And that I imagine that's probably a whole other episode and
It
discussion
is.
around like this like the spam thing. But anything else in like in terms of that, kind of first 30 days, et cetera. Like, are there some, obviously sending a number of them in the first day, and you're kind of setting up to the first 30. Is there kind of like one cadence that you found that you're like, hey, every time I go into, more or less, obviously there's going to be different use cases and scenarios type of users, but more or less this structure of the first 30 days typically works in terms of like which days that you send it.
I've found, like I said, early, very heavy in the first 7 days to be
Got it.
critical. I mean first 7 days of acquiring that email address, not necessarily the customer, right? You get the email address, it's relatively hot. You probably want, like you said, it's all dependent on the type of company. But if you're talking e-commerce, short window, short sales cycle, you probably want to try to get them in that first 7 days and not let them lapse. Now, if you're coming from a gaming company like we've come to
Mm-hmm.
know and love, it's a little different, right? Because it's about engagement. So you're just paying them with that opportunity. It's all about, they downloaded the game, they gave you the email for probably some strawberry harvesting or something. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not super urgent. You just need to. It's generally like, what time and day of the week did they make that transaction, and then just following up, making sure you follow up exactly at that same time every day. Because people have habits. So if
Right.
they had time on a Friday afternoon, you know what? Next Friday afternoon, you better hit them up, right? Like
Got you.
those type of things work. Or if it's every Friday afternoon, or every afternoon thereafter for 7 days to get an idea. And if you're like, hey, they only came back on Friday, guess what? You probably want to do every Friday, right? Like you probably want to lighten it up and go 1, 3, 5, 7, just stuff like that.
Yeah.
To truly understand, you know your product as a business owner. If you're selling high-end watches, you probably don't want to do every single day, right? Because
Gotcha.
it's not a daily purchase. But if you're a newsletter style content provider, then you may want to just send content when it matches.
I think it's interesting to talk about kind of that initial cadence and trying to figure out the behaviors of, I guess your user base at large, but then maybe also individual behaviors. So I imagine like since in the time you've been in the space, there's way more tools and personalization that can occur at parts of the life cycle, and you can use platforms like a Braze that you mentioned to really hit them at the right moment. How have you maybe seen kind of AI tools in the space evolve, and how important is that versus, hey, there's kind of like a tried and true approach that more or less works, and you're not going to see but so much incremental conversion on using AI?
Yeah, yeah. I haven't done a campaign with AI yet, um, but my concern would be that it feels too robotic, that doesn't have that freshness in your brand voice. But if you train your AI bot well enough, you should be able to.
Yeah. Cool. I think that's kind of interesting. I imagine that's going to change the space in some ways. I realize like within on in-app and some platforms, they kind of allow you to send the customization, kind of send at the right time. So I was just curious if you had any experience with that, or
No,
done that.
I haven't. I know, like at Twitch, and some others, there have been instances of being able to send content live when they open the email and
Hmm.
triggering things that way. And those are getting harder and harder because Apple, now Apple Intelligence is going to intercept your email, essentially load it onto their server and wait for you to check your email. And that kind of, makes it difficult for a marketer to understand what is happening because
In real time.
you're not getting like when did they actually open their email? When did they check it? Did I have the right info in there? Now you have an intelligence. You have AI checking it and storing it and then feeding it to the person. Like there's one more thing, a layer in the middle of that, which yeah, I think that's going to make life harder for life cycle marketers to understand what is going on.
Yeah. I want to shift over to kind of like a retention and nurturing section next. But before we do that, something that I think might be valuable to listeners is around like subject headlines, and like maybe two or three kind of best practices in what you found in that initial subject line. Because I imagine relative to emails, particularly, that's kind of like the top of the funnel for there,
Yeah,
for that initial interaction with your email.
you know, that's so funny you said that because I remember when I first started, whatever, 20 years ago doing this, I always had a very specific, like, this is how I want to structure it. And then I always run A/B tests, and I'll do A/B with a holdout, meaning a section does not get the email, and then you've got an A and a B, two types of subject lines. And what I found is you need two very different subject lines with a type of theme, or you need two extremely similar, just change one word to try to understand what works and what doesn't. And I found I don't know anything, basically. Like I have no idea. Like
Test
it's
everything.
really, yeah. You
Yeah.
you just have to test because sometimes I'm like, all right, this is what's worked in the past. Now it's going to go this way, and it doesn't. So,
Hmm.
which is why I always just test, right? You don't know. But I found like having some personalization builds some trust. They don't feel like it's spammy. So you put your first name and your comma to start an email. I've seen lift, uh, in that alone. Just simply adding just and comma in there immediately tells the end user, oh, these people know who I am.
Hmm.
They're not a spammer. Other things is adding. I know I've added emojis. I've added calls to action in the end. Little things like that. What I've seen is like you'll see an initial spike, and then it'll kind of just like people just have blindness to this kind of thing. So it's just a
Hmm.
matter of, I won't name the company, but a company I was with prior. I actually built a subject line. Basically, I called it a freshness generator. I'd put in all the ideas that everybody had with emojis, CTAs, new words, trendy
Yeah,
things, and I'd just interject them in there. And the tool itself would just grab a different one every single time.
that's cool.
So some days it would say it's lit. If that's a popular term, it would throw that in there, and then it throw in fire emojis, and then we would just keep changing things up to always have that sort of freshness to the emails, and that did well. Like that did really well, and I would just always have the executive team and other people like within the company say, hey, if you hear a term, if you hear a funny like saying, send it to me. I'm going to add it to this list, and
That's so great.
it continually just grew and grew, and then people loved it because they'd get their email and be like, "Ah, my little emoji or my
Yeah,
term that
yeah,
I heard made it in there." You can imagine that's just like one other thing that you see in subject line that makes a thumb stop. You're like you
yeah,
said, your inbox is like Twitter feed, right? You're scrolling through it. What makes you stop?
yeah,
If every time you say Justin, comma, I'm gonna miss that the third or fourth time, right? But if one time it's Justin, the next time it's got an emoji, and the next time I don't know what's gonna hit with you. So like doing that all the time, I've seen work well. Um, but I think you just gotta stay on your toes. I know that's a terrible thing to say. There's no like smoking gun because it's one of those things, right? Like
yeah.
if everyone does it, then it doesn't work anymore.
100%. I've definitely seen that with like all spanning all across the market again, whether it's social copy, whether it's, paid ads, whether it's, any kind of creative that you have on your website, right? If you're not keeping it fresh, then people kind of glaze over it, right? Within the
Yeah,
mobile space, which is where I spend a lot of time as well, you want to create, I did not coin this term, but thumb stopping moments, right? And I
yeah.
imagine the same thing with these with the subject headlines. I also love the creativity and the collaboration there, working with your team.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
for I was going to say for those people, if you have a CEO or an executive who loves the email subject lines and forwarding gives you suggestions, that is your perfect person to ask for stuff like this.
hmm,
In terms of like sending them a list of subject lines and tests and putting that in there and doing that, I mean, they'll love that.
yeah,
And kind of give them the runway to like sort of be creative and think about those things. They will love that idea and put that in there. So highly recommend
yeah,
getting people involved in your team that know it. Anyone who forwards you and be like, "Hey, have you tried this?" Like that's someone you should definitely use to sort of think of A/B tests and different things like that.
yeah. I want to transition now to, nurturing this existing user base. So you've onboarded them, day 1 through 7, you're sending a lot of emails through day 30, you're getting acclimated with the product, you're learning more about them. And now they're a user. They're a user of the product. Now they could, lapse at some point, but they are a user. You're getting the signals that they actually, like your product or service, or they're making regular purchase, et cetera. How do you then
Right.
think about that nurturing period, not only in terms of maybe other things that your team is doing, because I imagine you're working like product and product marketing, et cetera, maybe things that they have coming up that you want to add in, but then also, more holistically in terms of, okay, we're transitioning to not just email, but it's other in-app like push notifications or interstitials or other things part of lifecycle. And I know sometimes that lives fully on product, but I imagine sometimes it's collaboration between kind of the email send and product. So how do you think about that as kind of like after this onboarding piece, that nurturing part of the journey?
Yeah. No, that's a great one because I think a lot of companies and a lot of just products tend to like bury content in their site and assume the user is going to somehow find it.
Yeah,
And say,
one
hey, we're going
hundred
to make
percent.
this incredible announcement, and I'm going to bury it under the hamburger menu, under news, under this, under that. Like no one's ever going to find
Eight
it.
taps.
Yeah, it's like you might as well not even do it at that point.
Yeah,
It's just for your investors. So then email is a great tool for that, right? You can put it in there, you can put it in the footer and the header, you can put it as a reminder in the what's new, you can bury it. I like to use like banner style
hmm,
content within the emails. So if you're gonna create like I call them triggered emails, which is like something happens on the site, a receipt, someone sends you a message, You need some interaction on the site happens. You notify the user through the email that happened. Create a little banner, and then rotate that information in that banner. If it's some product thing, if it's some other piece of content, it just gives you one more piece of real estate to tell your user base about that thing. Because a lot of this, you talked about push and toast, like not everything
Hmm.
falls under those buckets.
Right.
And as a company, you want to tell them that this is happening, and what better way than repeatedly including it in communications um, about this message. So hopefully they see it, because people think you put an email, everybody gets it, we're done, but really 5 to 10% open, like, right, 1%
Hmm.
maybe click on it. Let's just think about 5 to 10% open, and it's generally the same 5 to 10% every time.
Yep.
So you want to use your different lists and different things to try to get a broadened reach. So over time, getting that seen multiple times, plus social, plus in the product. I feel like that's the best way to do it. Use email as a channel, knowing that it is not an all encompassing. It is a
Right.
it is a percentage of people that will see it.
Yeah, I like that. Because when I think about email and I think about just other touch points with the consumer, I think about it within the context of overall impressions. And you have kind of your own channels and platforms. Obviously, you have paid as well. That's kind of like that's different as a tactic relative to paying for the eyeballs versus just across your channels. But I think that the companies that I've seen perform best really have a holistic approach about how they think
Yeah,
about the customer journey. Whether that's sending, making sure to send dedicated emails to triggers and the pushes to even their social media accounts, making sure that
yeah,
as people are checking their different platforms, that message is conveyed a number of times, so that after 3 or 4 touch points, the consumer actually understands, oh, okay, this is the action you want me to take, or this is the new
yeah,
initiative, etc. And I totally agree. You can't think of it as like a one-off channel approach where they see something and then you're done.
yeah. I mean, others ask, should I create a newsletter and start sending company information through a newsletter? I mean, again, it depends on what kind of company you are, but generally it's just you promoting yourself over and over. People tend to see through that and don't want to read
Yep.
through it. Like you said, how often are you really sitting in front of a newsletter and like, all right, I'm gonna read this thing top to bottom? It's tough. It's really
Yeah.
tough. So you gotta think about it in bite-sized snippets, along with anything, right? So if it's headline plus link, then you do that a few times to get the message across. It's weird because, like, if you want to take the approach of sending a bunch of information through email,
Yeah.
um, you've got to take a different approach. I would not use the standard like format. You probably want to use your CEO's name. You want to make it look like a regular text email. If
Hmm.
you have like a real important message to send across. So really, like you said, it's kind of case by case basis. And I've done it before. There are times where you're like, you know what, this is an important message, and I've got to get it all in the body of this email. So I'm going to send, like, that's generally how I do it. CEO or whoever, somebody who's relatively known, they're in the from line. The subject line is more serious. Then you've got a body, just like a regular text email. You get rid of the
Yep.
graphics and headers and all that, and you just auto load, the text in there. And
Yep.
it's probably kind of in a backwards way because it looks so different. Then people are like, oh, cool. What is this? This sounds
Hmm.
important. I'm gonna look at it. But if you do that every time, it's kind of the boy who cried wolf. You can't do that every time, right? You don't want
Yeah.
to
Yeah. Yeah.
save those bullets. You can't just say, I'm going to send all of mine tech, like then no one's going to read anything. So it's kind of a
Yeah.
delicate balance that you've got to constantly weigh.
Yeah, one of the things you mentioned, kind of like triggered emails, which are, they're event driven by certain actions that a user has taken. I know there's also kind of
Yep.
marketing emails, or they're kind of
Yep.
in the example you gave, like an important communication, privacy term update, et cetera. How do you think about like the mix of those different tactics? Because I think a lot of people think of emails just like you just send an email, but then within email, there's all these different tactics within it. So maybe just focusing on kind of event driven email, like trigger based emails versus like marketing emails. when are you sending those marketing emails out, and when does it make sense? And because you don't want to inundate folks, especially if they're getting triggered. When's the right time to do those?
I mean, again, it's going to come with the data, understanding when the triggers happen. But like most companies, the triggers happen in real time, right? If you're a social media platform, or if you're a platform that has messages, and you're going to send, user to user, they're going to send each other messages. You're going to get pings. You're going to get lots of triggered emails saying, "Hey, Justin sent you a message. Come, here's his message." I think what I've found useful is to have all of those trigger typed emails under a different name. So have them somewhat transactional based and have a name tied to that. And name, I mean, like Facebook saying messenger, then those are messages
Mm-hmm.
versus their marketing stuff would come from on our Meta. So just simple shifts like that could help not make you feel like the inbox is just taken over by your company.
Yep.
Um, so just be mindful of and one of the things that I always do is I set up an email address. Um, and then I log into that email. Like I put them on every list, and then I make sure to check that and say, hey, what are my
Mm-hmm.
actual email? What do I look like in the inbox? That is so
Yes.
important, right? Like that's often
100%.
overlooked. Like how do I look in the inbox stacked on top of each other? Do I look
Yeah.
like I'm spamming the heck out of people? And that is an incredible tool. And people laugh. I have an email account that I literally just put all like marketing messages and everything, and it's got a few 100,000 unread messages in there. So, but it's insane. Like, but it allows me to go back and like search what did Amazon's emails look like in 2015?
Mm.
If I hit welcome, it shows me every welcome from all these. And it's just so people know I'm not joking. Here is my, if you can see right there, 151,000.
You're going for like a record there or
Insane.
something, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
So anyway,
I think yeah, I think that's also interesting in terms of like one, I think for any kind of marketing practice, if you're sending out creative, you're doing social posts or whatever it is, you want to check to see how it's actually going to look in that
look,
format.
yeah,
So I totally 100% agree with you on that, and I've definitely made mistakes in my career where the formatting or something look fine on mobile, but then the desktop it looked weird, or on mobile web it looked okay, but within the app
right.
it wasn't looking great. So definitely feel like that level of testing makes sense. Maybe in this last section, talk about the kind of final piece of kind of talked about the importance of measurement and making sure that you're kind of doing that initial diligence. Then we talked about the initial onboarding and like how frequently you should be sending messages and around subject lines and kind of getting that initial interest. Then transition to kind of the nurturing phase of, all right, well, now they're in your ecosystem and now you're continuing to send the messages. This last piece, like the advocacy. So these people are not only using your product, but they're advocates, they're evangelists. How have you best found like using the tools at your disposal to bring to leverage those people to kind of improve a K factor to the extent that that's possible, or to leverage them to disseminate a message or follow your socials, things like that? Are there some kind of best practices along those lines?
I mean, in my experience, those people are going to kind of jump through hoops um, to be an evangelist for you. So you don't have to do a ton. Small
Mm-hmm.
messages, like notes in your email with thank yous, and then codes like, hey, send this to your friends. Make the emails very forwardable, which I think a lot of companies don't do.
Mm-hmm.
Send them something, give them a snippet to forward to someone that is incredibly useful. Or copy, give them a snippet to copy and paste to put into their text or whatever. Those things are great. Like every company is going to be a little bit different in how their clients, our customers, share. So you need to kind of test your way into it, unfortunately,
Yeah.
and then figure out what works. Like, are they going to forward through text? Are they going to forward through emails? Are they going to put it on social? Are they going to? And they're probably not going to do social. Let's keep it real, but something like that. Like,
Yeah.
make it easy for them. Like, give them the copy. let them in the link, and then let them copy and paste and give them something for their time. So I think
Yeah.
those are the, keep it really simple, to do that.
Yeah, I love the theme that seems to be that kind of the theme throughout everything you said is testing and not going into any of these approaches with kind of a dogmatic understanding of this is the one way that you do this within this practice. I think that's so relevant,
Right.
not only to life cycle, but like kind of everything across marketing. And there have definitely been times when I said, oh, this is going to work amazingly well based on how it worked at another company, has not worked, or this probably won't
Right.
work, and it has.
Right.
So I think keeping that kind of open mind, even as you become more seasoned, like we have been in the space, it's always changing. Consumer behavior is always changing. There's different formats. So I think that's like a really, really great takeaway, just kind of generally about, um, like taking kind of like a very experimentation and A/B testing approach to marketing, and not being so, not again, not being dogmatic and in your understanding.
And I will say one other thing that both of us have run across is you've had a leadership who says, prove to me this worked.
Mm-hmm.
Um, show me the data that said this. Show me the smoking gun, that this was the driver. And one way to, and this has been really difficult depending on the data, but having a holdout across the board,
Yes.
having a steady holdout, which I think is often a battle, right? Like, you're the same person who's asking me for a smoking gun is probably like, why are you holding out, and not sending
Five,
to
10% of your
everyone?
audience. Right. Yeah.
Because they're like, hey, this thing works. Why aren't you sending it to everybody? And then you've got to have the ammunition to say, we need that holdout to show that this thing works. So when
Yep.
you come to me with the question of what's the actual lift, I have an answer.
Yeah.
So I've been trapped by this. Show me, I need the data, da, da, da. And then, this thing is amazing. Send it to everybody. I don't care about your holdout. Send it to everybody. Then you send it to everybody, and then a month later, it's like, all right, now what's the holdout? It's like, what do you mean? I sent it to everybody after you told me, and then it's like, well, why would you do that? And then you're just in this cycle.
Yeah.
So I think you having, um, both the understanding and the know-how, like, I need this holdout, and I need it to stay clean, right?
Yeah.
Because, that's tough. It's really tough because often, like, as a short-term thinker, you're going to be like, you know what? It's the holiday season. This Black Friday email crushed it. I'm going to send it to everybody, and like,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it may make total sense to you, but like, you just got to know, um, when you need to do a holdout later, it's going to be muddy.
Yeah.
When you need that holdout, it's going to be like, well, technically they got a Black Friday email, and then what? Then your list is kind of like post Black Friday, and you just need to keep that list as clean as possible,
Yeah.
as much as possible.
Yeah. No, and I definitely, especially in the times we are now where, and I think you would agree, you have kind of less data on users because of different privacy
Yep.
settings, et cetera. It's just like so much harder to even kind of understand what users are doing. So if you then eliminate like a holdout, you're
Yeah.
kind of left with like throwing your hand. It might be great in that one kind of 2 month period, but then after that, as you try to do other experimentation, all the other data becomes muddied, and then it kind of messes up your future experimentation. So that makes complete sense. Um, this overview that you gave, man, has been incredibly robust and hopefully super helpful. It's definitely, there's definitely a ton of gems in here for me. I can't wait to kind of clip this up because I think people are gonna really appreciate some of the nuggets. But I'm curious, like maybe before we jump, anything that I haven't covered that you feel like, well, this is something else people should think about, relative to kind of life cycle, and particularly with the focus on emails in terms of any part of the journey that we talked about.
No, I think we covered the basics. I mean, obviously, email is such a unique tool. But
Yeah.
if you have questions, thoughts, concerns, reach out. You'll have all of our info, in the channel tags, and we could tell you a little bit more, one on one versus in a broad setting like this. But yeah, like, I think we covered the basics. I don't want to. It's probably a little higher than 101, but
Yeah.
but I think it'll get somebody started. And the whole point is like start testing, start thinking about your framework, and keep it simple. Honestly, like those simple concepts, sometimes you tend to go a little too deep. If you keep it simple, like, hey, I know people love to use my platform on Fridays. Um, Maybe I should
Yeah.
send more on Fridays or Thursdays or whatever. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I maybe want to close on like one example of when we worked together. When I joined, if we were coming from working on our dating app Bay, and this is our first time working on the app, so we were just trying a whole bunch of stuff, and we found that kind of marketing driven push notifications, like ones that we sent out with a cultural message, kind of randomly would drive a nice spike in daily active users, and you know, T-Dub use that insight to put together a campaign of when we were at Tag, like, oh, your area is hot right now. I bet you they still do those. They still
for
do those
sure.
pushes as a way of continuing to drive like DAU bumps, and that stuff works really well. But so it's kind of fun to think about how these things worked in practice, and the testing and experimentation piece, which is important, but also a lot of fun. Like when you get those winners.
Yeah, for sure. That's amazing. It's a really good feeling when you find something that works, then it's like on to the next one. It's really
Yeah.
you celebrate it, and then it's like, all right, how do I do that again? Because it is it's like a dopamine hit. Like when you
Hmm.
get something that really moves, and we've done it before. You get something that shows 20% lift in retention. You're just like, I need more of that, which is
Yeah,
great for
yeah,
the company and for you because it's just fun to do, right?
exactly, exactly. Well, Tito, I want you to be able to get back to your Hawaii vibes, and thanks for blessing us again with that shirt. If y'all like this content, make sure you like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. And like TW always says, please reach out to us individually. We have our LinkedIn handles in the um, in our bio, in the kind of about section of the pod, and in the description. So we'd love to hear from you.
Peace
Peace, man.
out.
Later.
Mahalo.
Mahalo.